Hello, welcome to FX PhD. My name is Matt Leonard and this is class number 10 of Katana 101. So we're going to be covering a whole host of different things in this class. It's going to be a kind of a mixture of lots of different things, including 2D compositing. We're going to be looking at assigning textures to our geometry. We're going to be looking at things like arg files and .katana folders. We're going to be looking at things like the attribute script editor and instancing, so a whole mixture of different things. So first off, let's talk about 2D compositing. Now at Sony Picture Imageworks, they had a system called Bonsai, and this was used around 2005-2006 on projects like The Chronicles of Narnia and Superman Returns. Now Bonsai was coming to an end and they basically decided they wanted to upgrade it, and another team at Sony were working on a lighting tool, and so they took the best bits of Bonsai and this lighting tool and they combined them into what we now know as Katana. And this was happening around 2007-2008, and they were using the 2D compositing system in Katana to do things like the compositing on I Am Legend and GeForce. Now around 2009, Sony took the decision that they were basically going to move completely over to Nuke as their main compositor, and that's been used since then on shows like Alice in Wonderland and The Amazing Spider-Man. Now, what we have in Katana now is still a pretty full 2D compositing tool set, and it contains tools for doing things like color correction, color management in way of OpenColor.io. We can do filtering, transforms, we can bring images in and out, we can create things like constants, and we also obviously have a full suite of compositing operations. And so we have nearly 60 compositing nodes available within Katana. Now when the Foundry released it, which is obviously the version we have the commercial Foundry version, they took out some of the high-end features that were in Sony's version. Things like roto, keying, things like that they didn't want to double up on, because obviously if you left all of Sony's compositing tools in Katana, why would you want to buy licenses of Nuke? So it doesn't make sense to do that. So a lot of the functionality, or some of the functionality rather, has been taken out of Katana, but we still have a lot of things we can do. So let's immediately jump over to Linux and start having a look at what the compositing system in Katana can do for us. Okay, so here we are in Katana. I'm going to, for this example, just come to layout, and I'm just going to change this to composite 3. And this is really good for doing any form of kind of compositing, because you just get a big screen with the minimum of kind of tabs open. Okay, so this is our monitor, this is our parameters, and this is our node graph. What I'm going to do is I'm going to move my node graph to here, my monitor to here, and my parameters to here. Okay, so should be good enough to go. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to right click, and you can see one of the things we have is this IO. So this is image in and out. So I'm just going to go with an image read and double click, and over in my parameters I'm going to come in and I'm just going to browse to my desktop, and I'm just going to come to class 10 and I'm going to grab the background. In it comes. Now the reason why it's red is to do with this color space. It's basically saying it cannot find a valid color space file name. So I'm going to go with a INF, which is just a linear, and this is what we're getting. Okay, so there's our background plate. Then I'm going to come into another image node, image read. I'm going to just bring in all of the other images that we need. So again, double click or E to edit, and I'm just going to bring in again the diffuse. And again, that's going to have the same problem that we've got here. So again, we're just going to change that there. Double click and you can see there it is. Okay, and this time I'm just going to copy this node, copy and paste it, and this one I'm going to change to direct specular. Okay, so that's that one. Copy, paste. This one's going to be our indirect, so indirect specular. Just make sure I got that one right. indirect specular, yep, so that's fine. And then again, copy and paste the last one, which is the reflection. So we should now have the direct diffuse, the direct specular, the indirect specular, and the reflection. So that's everything we need. So first off, if we look at this one, this image, and we go to the catalog, we can see that this image is actually 2K Super 35. And if we come to this image, right click interactive render, this is going to pop up. And we're going to see this one is 1K Super 35. So what we're going to do is we'll just come in here and we're just going to right click, and we're going to come this time to 2D and transforms, and we're going to go with a reformat. So that just drops in underneath. Back to our panels here, and we're just going to drop this down to a 1K Super 35. Okay, so now we should find that that is the same size as these. So from here, it's going to be a question of just normal compositing. So I'm going to go with an image, and we want a composite plus, and we have background, which is going to be this one, background to foreground. Okay, and as always, we're going to keep our foreground running, coming in from the side, our background running down. But what we're going to notice is that it kind of needs to come in from the side. If it comes in this side, it crosses. So it's coming from the right hand side, which is obviously different to the way it does in Nuke. So we'll connect this one up here. And it comes. Copy paste again. Drop this one in. And connect up. If we view all this, we should now be getting this. So we've gone from here, 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 here. Not quite sure why we're not seeing that one. We'll turn on and off display thumbnail, see if that helps. Nope. And we can also regenerate the thumbnail, so that's going to help us. Okay, so that gives us that. Now we're then going to do a image composite, and we just need to do a straightforward over now. So we're going to have this over here. It takes a bit of time to get your head around working the other way, as we're so used to working one way in Nuke. This comes in here. In we go. And I'm just going to add a dot node just to bring that down there. Okay, there we go. And if we now look here, we're getting this. So what have we lost? It looks like we're missing the alpha, and we had that problem last time. So I'm just going to bring in again another image, and this is going to be our matte. So let's just go ahead and browse and grab our matte pass. Okay, and that looks like this. Now, in order to combine these together, instead of using an image over that's obviously doing this, what we want to go with is a composite, and we want an image matte mix. Okay, and that has three inputs: the background, which is this one, we have the foreground, which is this, and then we have the matte, which is this. Okay, so let's just swap these out, bring this one over here. This can come in just above, say here. And when we look at that, we get the same thing, but what we want to do is take our matte. If we regenerate the thumbnail again, the matte is actually in the color, so I'm just going to go with a channel of R, and now you can see we're getting that composite through. Okay, so we want to probably do a bit of color correction to some of this, so let's just bring this down, give ourselves a bit of space there. And you can see this kind of wants to go over here. Kind of tricky. So let's see what we've got color wise. We've got quite a good selection of things. We've got obviously all the normal kind of brightness, contrast, things like that. We have things like image channel, See, this is really interesting. This enables you to basically shuffle things around. So we could take, for instance, this combination here, and we can switch these on. You can see we can kind of shuffle everything around in different ways. That's the alpha. Okay, so that can be quite useful to various things, but that's not what we want. We want to go with, first of all, probably just something to match the overall color. So we've got, again, if we come back to color, we've got gamma. So we're going to need that. So we'll drop that in. And make sure we're viewing down here again. We also have overall exposure. So I think this is a little bit hot for what we want. So I'm just going to drag this over here. And what we're going to do is we're just going to come in and we're going to drop the overall intensity down. So you can see as I bring that up and down, we get a nice change there. So I'm going to drop that maybe down half a stop. And then my image gamma, I'm going to come into that. And I'm going to just adjust that slightly so you can see the effect that's having. So maybe just bring that down 0.95 is probably all we're going to need. We also have the ability, if we look here under color, to do things like clamp. So we could just clamp the alpha, or we could clamp the RGB. We could do general contrast and things, fade, gain, which is obviously an additive, and add, invert, general levels, and then just drop the saturation, which again I think we need to do on this one. So I'm just going to come in and again just grab a saturation node, bring all this down a little bit. We can grab this bad boy, there we go, and again make sure we're just editing this, and we just want to drop the saturation just a little bit. I always like taking just a little bit of desaturation off. Okay, so again that gives us something like that. Okay, we're going to need to make more space as always. Now under the effects we don't have too many kind of filters. We basically have an image blur. So again, as you can imagine, if we bring that in, that's literally just going to blur the image. So we can do it in X and Y, and we've got various kind of filters here, the normal ones, Mitchell, Gaussian, etc. But if we feel like we want to blur each of these, we can do. I don't think it really needs it. Maybe just a little bit might help us. I think it just helps a tad. Okay. Again, let's get rid of that. Move this up a little bit. And again, maybe add a dot node underneath. Now, other than that, we've got general transform. So if we want to do cropping, general distortion, orientation, position, etc. I, for instance, might say that I want to just move the whole thing. So just through way of showing you, again, budge this all down. We've got a general transform, rotate, scale, shear, very similar to what we've seen inside of Nuke. So let's just say I want to budge this over, so let's maybe move it 25 over to the side. What you'll also notice is that the alpha, because it's separate, is going to need the same thing. So I'm just going to add this directly to the alpha as well. Okay, so now you can see that's all aligned and moved over. Okay, and we can do things like rotate, as I said, and apply motion blur if I want to. And we've got a whole bunch of controls under here for the shutter and shutter samples and things like that. But obviously we've got nothing like that in our scene. Okay, so let's just close that up. So other than that, there's really not too much else. We've looked at the color, we've looked at the general compositing things, filtering, image IO. You've got some things like make black or white or text or color, things like that. And transform we've also looked at. So that's most of it. You have the normal open color IO things here. So if you wanted to do some open color stuff, you can. So that's pretty much it. If we wanted to now render this out, we just simply can add a IO write, and we just get this attached, and we say what we want to do. So we want to go with the name of the file here. So we're going to go to browse, and again just pop it onto the desktop. I'll call it comp01.exr, and we'll just accept that. You've got various things here under image, so you've got what kind of channels you want to use, color space, formats OpenEXR, etc, etc. You also have some information on just the bounds of the image, so we're going to go with that. It's all fine. If you have any render farm settings that need to be adjusted, you can go with that, so it can go straight to the farm. And then, as always, I'm literally just going to right click and do a hot render, and you can see that went whizzing through. And if we go to our render logs, you can see that that rendered in just under 2 seconds. Okay, so we can now go back to our image IO, move this down, again just open this up, and we're going to want to go with an INF. Again, just browse, there's my comp, regenerate the thumbnail, and it looks exactly the same because it is pretty much the same image, or is the same image. Okay, so that is 2D compositing inside of Katana. You've got quite a lot of control. Things we're obviously missing, as we've said, some of the things like keyers and roto nodes, but for this kind of work you've got a lot of control. Okay, so I'll just save this out so you have it. Just going to call this class 10 2D comp. Okay, so let's go back to Keynote for our next section. Okay, the next thing we're going to look at is network materials. Now, a network material enables you to build a shader from a number of smaller parts, which gives you flexibility and the ability to do things that would normally be impossible with a single material node, such as adding a texture into a shader, which is obviously a common thing you're going to want to do. Now, the network materials are connected into the recipe through the network material node, okay, and we'll look at that in detail in a moment. And what this does is it creates a scene graph location for you, and you can add terminals, which are also known as ports, which enable you to wire everything together. And just like a normal material node, multiple types of shaders can all be assigned. So in the Arnold standard shader, some of the things that you can connect into are the KD color, KS color, and KR color. So diffuse, specular, and reflection. Also refraction, exit color, transmittance, and various other attributes. Okay, so if you want to put an image into the diffuse or the specular, you can wire it in through one of these ports that I'm showing you. Okay, so let's have a look at what that actually looks like inside of Katana. Okay, so here we are back in Katana. I'm just going to load up a new project, which is called class 10 textures. And you can see that this is what we're ending up with. Let's just go right ahead and just make sure everything's visible. So make sure we expand all. We'll do a quick render just so you can see what's happening. Okay, so we basically have a house with some textures on. So if we just go full screen, you can see that's what we're beginning to get. Okay, so pretty straightforward. The way this works is we use an Arnold shading node and a network material. So we'll go ahead and make a Arnold shading node. This is the node that we basically say what do we want it to be. So I'm going to just open it up, and I'm going to say the node type is going to be a file or an image, and we've got various bits and pieces. Let's just stop our render while we're doing this. So the first thing is we want the file name. So I've given you a whole bunch of different flavors of files so you can play around with them, but I'm going to go with a house diffuse TX. Okay, and you can decide what kind of filtering you want, whether you want to do a mold or an offset on it. You've got various kind of UV coordinates that you can go with. All this pretty much works out the box. Then we're going to add an Arnold, surprisingly, shader node again. And this shader node is the shader node that's actually the material or shader itself. So we're going to say that we want just a standard. Okay. And then we're going to click on here. So I'm clicking on this arrow, click out. And then the end of this, I'm going to drag to the input of this. You can see now we have a big list of all the attributes we could basically wire this into. So I'm going to say I want it to go into the KD, which is the color. Okay, so that is now wired. So then I'm going to make a network material. Then I go to add terminal. I'm going to go with just a surface. And then we click the output of this and then click into there. Okay, and that should now give us the same thing. So I'm just going to bring this over here, and just so you can see the difference, so you don't know, make sure I'm not doing anything crazy. I'm just going to mult this up in the red, so we should get kind of a reddish tinge to this. Okay, so again, we're just going to slash in here, and you can see there is my house. Now, why aren't we seeing anything? Well, the reason why is this material assign, of course. So we're going to come into the material assign, and it's looking for network material, and we actually want, surprisingly, network material 1. So I'm going to drag this over, and again, right click, interactive render or slash, and there you can see our house with our red tinge on it. Okay, so I'm going to just put this back as it was, so that will now give us the original color house. Once, of course, we go back and adjust our network material, or our material assign rather. Okay, so we're good to go. All this is now set up as of last week, so we have our material settings, just doing an HD render. I've set my Arnold global settings just to give me 3 AAs and then 2 and 2. So remember, this is 2 squared, so that's 4, times by this, which is squared, so that's getting quite a lot of samples. We're setting then an output, a render output define, which is basically saying primary or beauty. If you remember, I said primary is often the beauty, and I just want to output that into a file that I am just putting on my desktop at the moment called test. And then when I open up this, you can see the outputs is primary color output test, and that's going over to my desktop. And this is the rendered image. So I've got my test here, and if I just double click interactive render, you can see that's what it's looking like. I'm then just doing a bit of a color grade and a blur, and then I'm taking my original image here, overlaying that, and then just adding kind of a tree and some foreground material in front of it, which gives me that. Okay, so that section is really just for a bit of fun. You can see nicely textured, and again, going back to this, any of these can be placed wherever. So I could take the out, and I could go into the color, into the specular, reflection, transmittance, etc., etc. So lots of things there we can play with. Okay, but I'll get rid of those just because they're pretty much the same as what we had before. Okay, so that is just applying textures onto shaders, and one of the ways you can go about doing that. Okay, let's nip back to Keynote and continue having